Hello and welcome to PEX Week Power 5. Power 5 and Power 10 are a new format for PEX Network, hopefully one that you'll see a great deal of over the course of the next year. They're video roundtables in which some of the industry's leading minds come together to discuss and debate various topics surrounding process excellence. I'm your host and moderator for this discussion, Craig Sharp, editor of PEXNetwork.com. Joining us today for our first ever session, from left to right, are Angel Garcia, Vice President, Operational Excellence, Univision Communications, Brad Power, Consultant and Researcher, FCB Partners, and regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, Kevin Wojciechowicz, Senior Director and Global Head, Business Optimization, Novella, a Quintiles company, and last but by no means least, Danica Natoli, Director, Lean Deployment, Ameriprise. Today's agenda will cover 4 key topics: using process to promote and encourage innovation, technology in process excellence, taking a blended or balanced approach to process excellence, and standardization, where to draw the line between autonomy and compliance. Starting with our first topic, using process to promote and encourage innovation, I'd like Danica to begin, please.
Hello, thank you. So for several years of my career in continuous improvement, we have focused on different aspects, whether it's going after shareholder experience, employee experience, customer experience, and a good chunk of it has been how do you free up people's time, to reallocate that time to focus on innovation. So how do we identify quick win opportunities that have a significant impact in freeing up people's time and reallocating that to how do we grow our business, how do we find time to experiment with new product lines, new business opportunities, and learn from that.
If I could chime in, I've been looking at innovation and process for several years now, and I believe that the disciplines of process improvement can be applied to innovation as they've been applied into operational excellence. There are different resources and they're used in different ways, and the processes of innovation are different. I see 3 innovation processes that need to be re-engineered. One is continuous delivery, the notion that instead of having batch releases that might be in quarters or measured in weeks, that you're making changes continuously hundreds and thousands of times a day. The second is platforms and ecosystems, and so that in the realm of innovation, applying process thinking and methods to how you can create a platform and how you can have an ecosystem and innovate in an open way. And the third is incubation, so segregating resources between the day-to-day and the breakthroughs that you might need to generate new top-line growth in separate parts of the organization, and how do you nurture and incubate those new capabilities. So those are the 3 disciplines that I see around innovation, and there's an opportunity to apply process thinking to improve those 3 processes.
In the part of media broadcasting, using process for innovation has been a wonderful experience. As you know, in the past, we used to watch TV just linear. You see what is on the studio, and that was it. Now we're using process to actually innovate the way that our audience watches by creating experience through social media. How do you incorporate actually digital and voice on demand into the show? So you need to understand that process very clearly. In actually, when you actually watch a show, it's no longer to watch people in a studio. You actually get how the audience interface with our talent through social media, through digital, Twitter, and different parts of the digital world that we have been able to innovate the way that we actually deliver our product to the audience. So it's been a real big part in how do we actually become more innovative in the world right now we have in TV.
Angel, if I could ask a follow-up question, that sounds like digital product development. It's using digital technologies to create new products and services. Is that an expansion of what you're doing with your traditional process work, or it's also an expansion of what IT would have typically done, because you're now creating new products and services not working internally?
Definitely. We are creating different platforms. In the past, it was just TV. Now you have the digital part where you have a voice on demand. So you only have, not only you have the linear part that you show at the time that is scheduled on the air, but you can actually have the same product in your tablet, in cable TV, in VOD, and definitely that create different ways for our audience to experience the shows that they're watching.
We use process to complement our innovative thinking here at Novella Clinical. First and foremost, we have sound business process management capabilities that really allow us to hone in on what are the deficiencies that we have internally, what's the opportunity that we have in our industry, especially since it's somewhat commoditized. So it really gives us the opportunity to isolate certain areas where we have that potential to do something big, and then we open it up and say, here's the potential we have, here's the area we want to focus on, what kind of opportunities do we have to innovate. We do it within the entire company as well. So we've used programs, and we have programs where we try to get every employee up and down the organization focused in on that one specific area or those few areas. And we have a program that's kind of a Shark Tank-like, if you will, for employees to come up with the best ideas, focusing in on that area. And we take them through the ringer, if you will, in terms of what's the opportunity, does it pass our initial sniff test, if you will, and then certainly as the ideas progress and as we challenge them, a few ideas make it to the top, and we're able to innovate and implement and obviously have a positive impact for our customers.
Is there an example you can share of one of those innovations that came from employees?
Come again? I'm sorry, Brad, come again?
Is there an example you can share of one of those innovations that came from employees?
Yeah, we've actually got quite a few, and recently, one of the big technologies specifically is in the space of clinical trials. We like to look at how do we do a better job of managing and communicating with our different investigator sites. So we had an employee come to us with several ideas around various technologies that can be used to increase the cycle time or decrease the cycle time in terms of how we can get documents back and forth to our sites through an integrated investigator portal, if you will, as well as how do we exchange information back and forth using mobile technologies within that portal to give us what we need in order to certify that site and make sure that site has what they need in order to perform the clinical trial. So that was a ground roots idea that came from one of our employees. We've taken that idea, and now we're going through the process of implementing that solution. That's going to have a tremendous impact, not only for us, but also the people that do business with us.
How do companies, or what's the best approach for companies to encourage innovative ideas from staff? We've had a couple of stories, some very good ones from you guys, and Brad's being the most recent, that staff are bringing forward these innovative ideas and that they're encouraged to do so. But as Brad pointed out, it's important for innovative ideas to be incubated from the day-to-day within the company so that they're given room to breathe and to gestate. Is that something that really should be standardized? Should there be a process in place to allow for innovation?
One of the things that we've done, we are building a culture of continuous improvement, and we're really transforming our culture to empowering the employee, freeing up their time to really identify what gets in the way of meeting their customers' needs. And in daily huddles, people are bringing forward what are those issues that get in the way, and then as a team, they are prioritizing which issues do we need to solve, and then the team is collaborating together on solving those. So our process is we bring these issues to daily huddles. We have a repository that those ideas are logged into. You can see the journey, the progression of the ideas in that repository. And then we have built into our culture, we have built into our behavioral anchors and into our goals, freeing up time for innovation and for empowering the employee.
I'd just like to make a definitional distinction between improvement and innovation. There's improvement, which is incremental, local, the kind of things you would get out of daily huddles. Typically, some of those might get escalated, and some of those might be sustaining innovations. There are things that change the way we do the work, but it's basically the same customer and the same value proposition. And then there are disruptive innovations, which are different customers, different value propositions. So I guess the question, Danica, would be, or for Kevin, since you seem to have something similar, as employees come up with ideas, are they more in the area of what I would call improvement and incremental, and what do you do if things come up that are more sustaining innovations or disruptive innovations, and if that happens?
For us, I would say it's both, really depending on the group that it's coming from. Many of them will be, what are those small changes we can make to have incremental improvement and make a difference in the way that we work today. And then some groups serving them up, those groups perhaps that are closest to the customer, as they actually listen to the customer on the phone or through some kind of written dialogue, getting closer to those critical requirements, coming up with perhaps innovative solutions that might be escalated to other teams, or where they'll work collaboratively with other teams.
Yeah, and I would agree with Danica. I think there's what I see typically is 8 out of 10 ideas, maybe 9 out of 10 ideas are more of the incremental improvements, and certainly you want to be able to take those in and listen to them and be able to act on them. But in our industry, and just my experience historically, yeah, it's harder to get really true innovative ideas, and what we typically tend to do is we'll take an innovative or a technology that's currently out there, like you go back to my portal example, using portals to communicate with sites or using portals to communicate with customers. That's not really a new technology. However, it is more innovative in the industry that we're in. So we may try to find or have what we would call an innovative idea in this industry, even though the technology or even the processes may exist in other areas. Implementing in our industry tends to be more innovative, and certainly how you implement and how you execute is where the innovation comes from.
You make a good point. Innovation doesn't necessarily have to come from new technology. You can innovate using existing technologies. Is that something the panel would agree with?
Completely.
Would you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, basically it's something very interesting when you got that idea. More than anything else, we have been living a process improvement using innovation in a current process that we have taken to the next level. I'll give you an example. One of our colleagues have come with a process named the car wash. And as you know, when we talk about a car wash, this is steps that when you get your car into the car wash, you go ahead and get your car wet, you apply the soap, then you got the brushes, you apply again the rims, and then you get the car out. And we have been applying that same process on the way that we actually bring new talent to our music vertical in our business. In the past, when you try to bring somebody into the process, you can have somebody come to one show, then tomorrow he goes to another show, and then the next day there's another show. And there is not a step-by-step integration to take the best out of that talent during the process. So we have created that car wash process that actually take that talent, and we actually take through the integration of the different platforms to actually make that talent successful in what we want for our audiences and get the best out of it. So instead of just jumping around to first apply the soap and then go back, we just do like, okay, this first step is this, second step is this, third step is this, and if we follow those steps, we're going to encourage the talent to do the right thing, and then we're going to get the most potential out of the situation. And that's something that has been forever over here, because we've been bringing talent every day. but it's a process that has been done properly now and definitely has improved our performance a lot and the ratings as well when we work in the different integration of platforms for that talent.
I think Kevin's actually lost connection.
Yeah, I'm still on the phone. I'm sorry, but I lost my connection somehow for some reason. So I just tried dialing or getting back in.
No problem at all. Kevin will be back with us hopefully very shortly. Danica or Brad, do you have any thoughts on innovation using existing technologies?
One of the things that a former company I was with did, we would have service technicians, installation technicians go out to homes to create solutions for customers in the consumer electronics arena. And you think of all the hundreds of products out there, thousands of products if you even are using older technology that a consumer has already in their home. This group created an app where all of the different technicians would create videos and store them in the app along with a little bit of text. That way, if another technician is facing a situation that they're unfamiliar with, they can go to their app and they can do some keyword searches and then hopefully find a video of someone who's encountered a similar situation.
I think we need to move on to the next topic, but does anybody have any final thoughts on promoting and encouraging innovation before we do? No? Okay. In which case, we will move on to, quite aptly, I think we were going that way anyway, technology in process excellence. Kevin, perhaps you could start by giving us some examples of how technology might have assisted you in your process excellence endeavors.
Sure, absolutely. I think first and foremost, when you look at things like mobility, that technology isn't necessarily new, but we've been able to implement various mobile solutions to allow people to access various systems, to do what they need to do while they're away from the office or while they're on the road, and freeing up that capability, it's a fine line, right? Because you don't always expect or want people to be online at all times, but certainly as industries move towards more remote working or more smart working, having the capabilities, having the technology to allow them to get their job done or get what needs to be done, having that accessibility is certainly critical, and it helps process across the board when you can serve it up in a way that can allow people to work in a mobile fashion.
Shall I chime in?
Yeah, sorry, of course. Go ahead. That was Brad, I think.
So what I'm seeing is a convergence of the technologies. I think we're in an unprecedented time with many technologies that are having an impact. That we've got mobile, we've got social, we've got big data, we've got cloud. And the interesting applications I'm seeing are the ones that sort of take and combine those technologies into something that's not been possible before. I'm looking at, in general, at the notion of continuous delivery, which I mentioned before. And if you think about, I was just talking this morning to someone who's in healthcare, and if you imagine that someone is calling in because they've had some kind of medical issue, and they call into a call center, and the person on the call center has pop up some profile of that individual. Maybe it's got something that helps them diagnose that situation, maybe a checklist. And then maybe there's some artificial intelligence. The WellPoint is working with the Watson group of IBM with some artificial intelligence that maybe makes some symptoms to diagnosis connections. Or maybe it looks at a whole raft of data about that individual and comes up with a unique, tailored solution for that customer. So you're applying possibly mobile. They're possibly doing that from an app. They're traveling. They're away. They've had interactions. The big data has tracked all of those interactions. It knows in detail about things that they've done or not done. And then they've used some artificial intelligence and some big data they've translated down, and maybe they're feeding that back to that individual through a mobile app. So what I see is going on is the convergence of a lot of these technologies into combined opportunities for process changes that didn't exist and are unprecedented, and are occurring at an incredibly rapid rate.
That's incredibly interesting. Healthcare, I know, have been experimenting with this for some time. Do you feel that perhaps they're a couple of steps behind some of the other industries? Do you feel they're now beginning to catch up, or that they're treading ground that other industries have already trodden?
I've spent a fair amount of time in healthcare, and if you look at the core of care delivery, if you look at acute care, if you had a heart attack and went to the hospital, that world's not changing very much. But if you look at the, lights went up.
Night.
There you go. Motion detector. I was sitting too long. I'll start over. If you look at the area in healthcare of acute care, you have a heart attack. That area, and you go to surgery, that area is not changing that much. But if you look at chronic care, if you look at things like maintaining your health and wellness, there are a lot of apps that are coming out that can help you maintain a healthy lifestyle, to follow your protocols, to take your medicine, whatever it might be, to eat well. So there's a lot of innovation, and the challenge is that healthcare is very conservative because it's very safety orientated. But there are disruptors coming in. The changes that are coming in many industries are companies that are coming in using a mobile platform, using an app as a way to get in. So Fitbit is, perhaps going to innovate the way that people do day-to-day activities and monitor those. Then it's going to go into healthcare, and then the next thing you know, Fitbit and some sort of app based on it are going to become your window into your health management. And so whether the traditional players in an industry are conservative and not that innovative, there are disruptors that are coming in and forcing their hand.
Angel, you also mentioned a lot of experience with mobile innovation. I believe you were talking about multi-screen experiences. Do you think these kind of ideas are something that could translate well into other industries, like healthcare, for example?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Craig. In the past, I have worked very closely on healthcare, and one of the biggest impact that I have seen on that technical integration for process excellence is on how do you actually do the remote monitoring and remote treatment of patients from a distance. Basically, you have what we call the healthcare telepresence, where a doctor can be in one location, the patient can be somewhere else, and the patient can be treated and do the whole diagnosis with that. That's an amazing experience right now, and actually it's one of the best examples that we have seen on how healthcare is transforming in actually work the different costs for operations, and how the innovation can be improved using this kind of technology to actually satisfy the patient in different needs they have. Not only they're using that in hospitals, you can do that for kind of a rehabilitation, you can do that for different kind of treatments, and it's moving into a very fast way that I would not be amazed that in the future, instead of you having to go to the doctor, you can have a platform or computer in your home where you can just hook up to yourself, and the doctor in his office can go ahead and take care of you without you going to the office. We're not that far away from that.
Yeah, and we actually use that.
Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
I'm sorry, and it's very relevant in the executing clinical trials as well. Historically, we've had to send people on site to make sure we understand what the data is telling us, to make sure that we actually have the data to ensure that we can report on it, to make sure we can understand what insights are being developed. Now with increases in technology and access to data, we're able to do more what we call remote monitoring, where we can understand exactly what's going on our investigator sites. We know exactly what's going on with the patients because patient safety is of utmost importance to us. So we can save money, we can increase timelines in terms, or decrease timelines in terms of how long things are taking in a clinical trial because we have better access to data and we can make decisions based off of that data in a remote fashion as opposed to going out on site and flipping through documents, flipping through data in order to understand what's going on. So technology has drastically helped us perform clinical trials in a more efficient manner as well.
Danica, do you have anything to add with regards to new technology?
I don't.
No?
Mm-mm.
I wanted to, while we're on the subject of technology, I'll have to move us along to the next topic shortly. I know that one of the key themes at this year's PEX Week is aligning new technology with traditional process excellence methodologies and ideas. I wonder if any of you have any thoughts on or experiences with that.
Hey, Craig, it depends on how you see it, and probably my colleagues agree with me. When we talk about process excellence, basically here at Univision and any other place that I have worked with, we're actually based on three main pillars. And you have to have this. It's what we call people, process, and technology. So if you actually are able to get the right mix for those three pillars, you get right on the sweet spot on how to implement and how you be successful in a process excellence program. So basically, when you talk about all technology, all process excellence way to do it, a new technology, I think that is something that is moving with time. The more that we get into more complex process, the more that we need of technology, the more that we need of people input and able to get it done. So it's very important that when we talk about that technology, and process excellence, they're not separate. The three of them are together and they move together forward. None of them can be lagged behind in order to be successful.
Provided, of course, that technology complements the process excellence endeavors, I suppose.
Completely, you're right.
How about the other panelists? I mean, more traditional process excellence endeavors. Is there a way to sort of blend those? Is there a way that technology can complement and perhaps enhance those?
What I see in a lot of organizations, if you look at it organizationally, there are a set of process people that come out of operations in the factories and plants and manufacturing. They're practicing Lean Six Sigma, and they're doing continuous improvement. In some of these organizations, they've implemented SAP or some enterprise system that has been driven from the center, top down, and it's required them to define process owners and a process architecture that's top down. And in many of these organizations, those two entities are separate. So the technology-driven one that's from the top down, from the application outward, if you will, is doing process work, and they call it process work, but it's different than the process work that's being done in operations. I don't know if any of the other panelists have seen that same divide, but organizationally there's sort of a technology-led kind of re-engineering of processes that happens, and then there's sort of a process-led or process, work improvement-led. How can we just make the work better?
In a past organization I was with, where similar to what you described, Brad, you would really have all of that driven by the IT organization, and where this company moved to was using operations personnel to be that liaison between IT and the business to really actually define, test out from a process perspective those business requirements, and then bringing that to IT versus IT really driving the change.
Do you think perhaps that's where there's been a disconnect in the past because IT tend to drive technological innovation, whereas process excellence has been generally kept separate from that?
I don't know.
Okay. I'll move us on to the next topic unless anybody has any closing thoughts they'd like to add. No? Okay. The third topic on the agenda is taking a blended or balanced approach to process excellence. Angel, perhaps you'd like to begin us with that topic?
You're going to have to give me a break on that one. Craig, can we have somebody else?
Yep, of course. Brad, I don't think you've started us on a topic yet. Would you like to take this one?
Sure. I wrote a post some time ago. I called it Uniting the Religions of Process Improvement. And the way I looked at it, my heritage is in business reengineering, which is radical change to end-to-end processes, top-down. You know, the half a dozen major processes that an organization would have, like order to cash or product development. And there's one school and disciplines around doing that, and that's often useful in organizations. Six Sigma I see as largely a methodology for reducing variability. It came out of a set of disciplines with Six Sigma black belts and master black belts, primarily focused on efficiency, at least as it came out of GE. And that's very useful when that's the challenge you face. And Lean, where I spent a fair amount of time, is very much focused on people and on continuous improvement, growing people and continuous improvement, eliminating waste, defining value for the customer, value stream mapping, and a set of tools and techniques in that area. All of these tools are useful in their place, and a lot of organizations have come together and they now call it Lean Six Sigma. So they've taken their toolbox and they've included tools from all of these different disciplines. And I think that's really the way that you would ideally want it. You want to reduce the religious wars between people who are coming out of one or the other of these religions, and you want to unify them and have a unified toolkit and apply the tool in the situation that makes sense given the conditions and situations that you find.
I totally agree with Brad on that. You know, companies just don't have the patience for a really long, drawn-out, structured approach that sometimes Six Sigma might take you to, which doesn't mean I don't support it. I love that structured approach. But for whatever the task at hand is, you need to pick the right tool for that. So in addition to offering a program of developing green belts, developing black belts, developing master black belts, having what are some of those key tools and teaching them broadly to the organization, whether it's value stream mapping, whether it's some structured problem-solving approach, you know, really how you brainstorm root causes, select them, brainstorm solutions, you know, pilot them on a smaller scale, and offering that to the organization. I think that you just get so much more value out of it. You have everyone approaching process improvement in a similar manner with tools that everyone can use.
I agree with Brad and Danica on tool usage. I'll also speak to some of the deployments I've led in various organizations across different industries. Our approach to the deployment has been a blended approach, and what I mean by that is we've focused on three primary things. The first is we want to increase process orientation within the organization. So that's things like making sure that we can offer different levels of Lean Sigma training, making sure that we can talk to new employees as they join the organization about process improvement and how we can get things done in a new way at the organization. So it's all about increasing that process orientation with the employees. The second piece is about the culture change, right? So it's about making sure that we have basic business process management, make sure that people can think of their process, can think of their business unit in that basic structure in terms of what are my inputs and outputs, how do I manage this process, really thinking of it like a business unit, what are the KPIs that I can use to really understand what's going on. So we hit people when they're coming in with with here's the culture that we want to drive. We support it with business process management and Lean Sigma training, and also we also have our seasoned, experienced Lean Sigma black belts, master black belts that can lead those large global cross-functional projects that can really drive an impact. So when I look at process excellence and a blended approach, it's not just the deployment of the training that we're going to offer, or it's not just leading large projects. It's really trying to hit the organization up and down in terms of how we get everyone interested and how we get everyone involved in various levels in terms of process improvement and innovation.
I agree completely with Kevin. Here we have a very interesting way of thinking that we're focusing a lot more on the process. We're trying, if you go here, you walk everywhere, we said that if you cannot measure your process, you cannot manage it. So in a very untraditional environment like it's media broadcasting, data and process is a very, very dark word. You know, we didn't know about that. We did not talk about that. So we have a set of individuals over here that actually, we work kind of like a consulting firm, and we work with our business partners in teaching them that. How do we actually see the whole thing, the whole picture as a process? What are those KPIs that actually make the process work the best? And what is what our customer wants? You know, at the beginning, we always thought about the customer to be the audience, and it's not. We actually have the internal customer that we have to make sure that we satisfy in order to make things right. So it's not about just working about the cost out, it's about the money you're going to save. It's about how do you actually focus on them on the process to make it better, to make it more cost efficient, and then that cost and money will come after that. And we have been working very, very hard with different business partners in order to understand that, and it's been a very hard, difficult shift in the culture that they have, and it's working. You know, now they understand that if you don't have data to actually measure your process, you're not going to be able to manage it.
There have been several mentions of culture, which is quite coincidental as I'm working on something akin to culture shift and how that affects a balanced process excellence approach at the moment. But I'd like to pose that question to you, framing it under change management. Change resistance, of course, is a common issue facing process excellence teams. Would you say that change resistance is a sign that perhaps a process excellence approach might not be balanced in the first place?
I think that that part is because the people that is involved on the business and the process, they do not understand the value of the process excellence or your process program. When you get to have on that resistance, it's because they do not have the knowledge on what they can actually get out of it. Once you have actually worked with them, you show them what the possibilities are, and you show them results, the value is in, and that change management get easier, and you get the buy-in from the stakeholders. But if they don't see the value, they don't see what they can get out of it, then that resistance gets harder and harder and harder to the point that then you get to become a failure. So it's very important that you make sure that from the beginning, and that sign can get away and you get successful.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that at all as well?
I think that for some companies, some environments, you know, it may not even be yet they don't understand the value in it. There might be some history, some culture already there where there's history that has caused employees to be resistant to any kind of change. And so I think that a company recognizing that and getting past that before introducing the value of process improvement, you know, might be necessary and critical.
Brad, I think you had something to add as well.
Yeah, it's a very big topic, but just one quick observation is that if you have people identify changes that they want, there's no change management issue. So in Danica's example, where you have a daily huddle and a work cell or a team comes up with an idea of something they jointly agree they want to do, there's no change management issue. Change management comes in when you try to impose things from outside. People naturally resist when they get things imposed on them. So in the example I gave of implementing an enterprise system, that is a classic example where you have change management because you're imposing a new way of working on people. So the opportunity, if you want to get buy-in, is to engage people as much as possible in the definition of what the work changes will be. And I think as Danica was also pointing out, there may be legitimate concerns and issues that resistance may be quite justified. And so if you can, ideally you want to spend that extra time up front engaging the people that are going to be impacted by the change in the definition of the change, then you won't have any change management issues and it'll be sustained.
Okay. Bringing us back to the original premise, I think that was me that took us off course a bit there. Blended approach. Would you say that today in the current climate for process excellence, that a blended approach is always the approach that should be taken, or do you feel that there are instances where perhaps a single discipline might serve a company better?
From my experience, what I would say is I try not to focus on the approach in terms of the methodology. When I talk to my internal stakeholders, we speak about business improvement, we speak about fixing problems, we speak about getting more customers. The toolkit that we may use or employ, if the customer wants to hear about it, we're more than happy to talk about it. But typically, what we try to do is say, look, we want to be a business advisor, we want to partner with you to make improvements. How we get there is part of our toolkit, and that may be Lean, that may be Six Sigma, it may be change management, it may be a mix of all three. I think the key, going back to what the other panelists have said, is it really is the flexibility of having that rich toolkit that you can choose from, as opposed to just going in with one methodology. I mean, I've seen example of people get trained in Six Sigma, for example, and they'll go in there and try to make everything a black belt or a DMAIC type project. And quite frankly, it just doesn't work that way. You have to solve problems, and you have to use whatever toolkit's available to solve that problem, whether it's one methodology or it's a mixture of various methodologies.
Okay. Does anybody have any final thoughts on this topic before we move on to the final topic? No? Okay. In which case we will move on to standardization, where to draw the line between autonomy and compliance. Angel, you've not yet started us off on a topic. Are you comfortable starting us off with this one?
Definitely.
Okay.
You know, it's very interesting when you talk about standardization. One of the biggest challenges that we have on the media broadcasting is how do you actually standardize several processes that they are very creative. Let me put it this way. How do you actually standardize the process for a graphic artist to actually say, you know something, in order to prepare the perfect graphic that we're going to need, you need to follow step A, B, C, and D. And by the way, you only have 1 hour to do it. That's very extremely difficult in our industry. You can have a graphic artist say, you know something, I don't feel extremely creative today, and you don't get the right product today. But what we have been able to get is that in order not to actually affect the way that the artist worked, we have actually mapped the process on what is the tools or what is actually the line of work that he used to actually create the product. And that's what we actually focus on. Make sure that we actually reduce the waste and reduce the actual parts in the process that will make it more time take that, but still keeping the creative part on the artist to produce what they need to do without affecting how creative they can be that day. So it's a very extremely thin line between that autonomy and that compliance on the process. But if you actually focus on those pieces, you actually be able to have both parties to be very happy and get the result that you're looking for without affecting the creativeness of the artist.
Does anybody have anything they would like to add to that?
I have a slightly different angle on this standardization.
Of course. Yeah, sure, Brad, please.
So I've looked at standardization and local variation, and it comes up almost wherever you have operational excellence, because you want to have standard ways of operating to achieve consistency, reliability, and low cost. But it always comes at a price, and there's always a limit where it makes sense and where it doesn't make sense. One of my favorite stories around this is I was having lunch with someone at Shell in Shell Center in London, and we were talking about Exxon. And in the oil industry, they talk about top quartile performance, second quartile, third quartile. The oil companies, the oil majors, share performance data among themselves disguised. They do it through third parties. So they can tell who's doing well and where they rank. And in the oil majors, Exxon is one of the companies that always rates near the top in terms of performance. And they have very standard ways of doing things. They have standard operating procedures for just about everything. And this guy said to me, I always love this, he said, and at Shell, by the way, they have a lot of discretion to do the right thing for companies, for customers. So it's about autonomy, following standards versus autonomy to do the right thing, or compliance, following rules and regulations. And he said, I would want to own Exxon stock, but I could never work there. So he said, essentially was saying, we need this operational excellence, we need these standards, but up to a point, and then it's also a question of what kind of people like to live in an environment where they're following rules or they're following checklists, when they're following standard operating procedures. People, again, shifting back to healthcare, if you try and impose checklists, there's some great checklists. There's a guy named Atul Gawande who's written about checklists in healthcare. And they can be very important to washing your hands, for example, things to do with infections, so on. And yet, healthcare professionals will resist doing these things on a consistent basis. So there's a tension between autonomy, control, and standardization, where you have we want to achieve consistency, reliability, and low cost.
We talked about innovation and technology earlier. I wonder whether any of you have got any thoughts as to how standardization and compliance might perhaps be, could they possibly be detrimental to innovation in process excellence?
I think it can present a challenge. In my industry, when you have being a heavily regulated industry with standard operating procedures and government oversight, it's always a challenge to really understand what is it that we can and can't do. I guess compliance and regulations, they serve as a boundary, if you will, in terms of the bounds of what you can and can't do. Now, sometimes it's very discreet. Sometimes they say you have to do X and you have to do Y. But a lot of times it's more of keeping you in line and scope in terms of what you can and can't do. And the challenge we run into is we tend to over-process. We tend to make some assumptions based on those principles as opposed to really understanding what it is that we can and can't do. So, for example, we tend to see things like if you go talk to a pharmaceutical sponsor, one of the regulations may be that we have to provide oversight, and we have to prove that we have oversight over the clinical trials that we're running. If you ask 5 different sponsors what that means, you would get 5 different answers. If you ask 5 different people within one company that's running the trial what oversight means, that you may get 5 different answers. Does that mean you have to record date timestamps of when you talk to different investigators about drug dosing? Does that mean you have to print out a document, have it signed, have a date and timestamp, put it into a special file? Is that oversight? What does that really mean? So the challenge we run into with innovation is we tend to try to over-process as opposed to really understanding what is it that we can do, what's going to pass the regulation while also being productive in terms of what we're trying to get done. And quite frankly, that comes back to having conversations up front, if it's the FDA, if it's the EMA, if it's the regulatory authority, or if it's just your sponsor trying to understand, this is the way we understand it, this is what we're going to do, are you comfortable with that? And that's how we like to approach the subject. Otherwise, it's really hard to innovate when you make too many assumptions and you tend to over-process based on those assumptions in a regulated environment.
If I could build on what Kevin was saying, there's a distinction between can do or should do. He was talking about can do, should do, and must do. There are guardrails. There are things that people have to do. There are things that are sort of decision rights you have sort of boundaries around. And then there are things where you actually want to encourage people to innovate. So being clear about decision rights is an important way to spur innovation, to say, you must do these things, but over here we actually encourage you to use your discretion and your latitude to come up with new ideas.
Okay. Danica, do you have any thoughts on this at all?
I think that if you are in an environment like Kevin was talking about, where it's highly regulated by some outside body, having in place an internal process that is well versed enough, whenever there is a change in process, there is some governing body approval in place, whether it's a combination of people from a risk team, from a legal team, etc., and then some formalized process where any recommended change gets put in front of this body, and then they have a process in place where it can be turned around relatively quickly. The decision turned around relatively quickly.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any final thoughts on this topic at all that they would like to share? No? Okay. That brings us to the end of our discussion. Thank you all for joining us. Do any of you have any final messages before we conclude? No? Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you talk, and I look forward to seeing more of you in January. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists today, and I'd like to thank the audience who are watching. If you would like to hear more from today's panel, as I just alluded to, they will be present at the largest global gathering of process excellence professionals in the world this January at PEX Week Orlando. For more information on their presentations, or to hear who else will be presenting, visit www.pexweek.com. And as always, for more white papers, interviews, podcasts, and more thought leadership, visit www.pexnetwork.com. Thank you very much, and goodbye.